Thank you, Ramsey. So I do have a list of questions, and I am going to modify this next question because both of you have talked about what is not part of the conversation. And I want to shift the lens just a little bit in terms of who's not part of the conversation or what's not part of the conversation to talk about the credibility. And Ramsey, I've taken note that you've mentioned several, I'd say, outside players. You've mentioned the Saudis. You've mentioned the Turkish government. You've also mentioned the US government. And I'm going to ask both of you, and Ramsey, I'm going to start with you, or I will come back to you. And you mentioned the media, and the media is 240 character world now. If it's not 240 characters or a soundbite, it gets lost. If it's not sensational, it's lost. But we also know that the world is for or against our words or silence, which raises the question of who can facilitate a dialogue between Hamas and the Israeli government, and how can that dialogue be facilitated? And I want to recognize that you've talked about selective understanding and selective empathy, and how that also plays into this for and against silence, but also the question of who can facilitate the dialogue. And so, Ramsey, I'm going to start with you, or I'll come back to you.
I'm okay with the words for and against when we talk about the Eurovision Song Contest. And this is really part of the problem of this particular issue. I often find that the way people engage with these issues is almost at a level of popularity or unpopularity. Those who feel an emotional empathy or emotional support for one side or antipathy towards another side. I thought, crikey, what about the unborn generations of both sides, whose fates are going to be decided by the popularity of their ancestors who are currently alive? I mean, how more bizarre, obscenely bizarre can we get? This is far too serious to be resolved by popularity, for and against. It fills me with horror. I shudder, quite frankly. And yet this is part of the problem. This is, again, what adds to the want of better word complexity. So part of the problem is it shouldn't be reduced to for and against. I think it needs to be looking at what could be an achievable end state, and from there then work backwards to be what could be a reasonable pathway to get to that end state. So the point of achievable end state, people talk about justice. I say, look, okay, if I steal Orit's wallet and I say, well, it contains the money she stole from me, that silly example I gave earlier on. Okay, that just happened in the last 5 minutes. No one's being killed. We can sort out the money. The money hasn't lost its value. It's relatively straightforward. But if we look at the amount of time that's passed, the amount of people that have been killed, the amount of destruction, then you tell me justice? We don't have a time machine to bring back the dead, to rebuild the collapsed building. Justice is almost a sick joke because of the level of complexity. This is where I do buy into the word complexity, because these several layers and the amount of time that has passed with one problem on top of another problem on top of another problem. I don't even call it conflict anymore. I just call it a mess. Quagmire. That is not to undermine the seriousness of it. It's actually to highlight how serious it is. It defies such a simple word as conflict. And so this is really part of the core problem. If we cannot achieve justice in the full meaning of the word, then what we can achieve, I suppose, at least is the appearance of legality. And this is, again, is why I upheld what South Africa did the ICJ, not because I have any particular attachment to the outcome of those court proceedings, but because that is the correct way to pursue a legally based charge accusation. It's an opportunity to exonerate the innocent and to clarify the degree of guilt of the accused if they are guilty. So that's the first thing that needs to be done. But then what is really crucial, if we say we're going to look at legality, so at least that is not going to be absence of legality. If you say, okay, it's just too complex, we can't look at all the ins and outs of legality. Let's just find a way for people to live peacefully together. No, because then you're sowing the seeds of future conflict. Because one side will say, well, but we were recognized by the International Court of Justice that it was our right to have A, B, C, D, and that was not fulfilled. So just in order to avoid sowing the seeds of future conflict, I think one thing is absolutely crucial is to address the legality within the appropriate fora as it related to the appropriate legal frameworks. But how do we get to the envisaged endpoint, the route to the end state? So if the envisaged end state is the state of Israel within its 1967 borders, for example, okay, does that mean that we destroy all settlements or all parts that are inhabited by Israeli citizens outside those borders now and use force to expel all residents, well, that's going to be creating another mass state of unfairness. So it's really a responsible phased plan, dare I say, a roadmap, but one that's really implemented this time, a path that has tangible, day by day progress toward that end state so that you achieve legality without creating yet another layer of unfairness. And that might be a good step in the right direction.
All right.
When I was invited to this discussion, I was told it's not going to be a strictly political one, and therefore I respect that and I avoid whatever I feel is not in line with the original guidance. And therefore I choose not to address things that I hear by Ramsey. I respect you, Ramsey, a lot, but let's agree to disagree on some of the things you say. I would just mention one thing about the choice of words. I respect very much your offer to be very, very careful with the choice of words. And when you said the settlements from the north of Israel, I really want to mention that I think this is the wrong choice of words, because these are legitimate borders of Israel. And choosing the word settlements might not lead to a language that we can continue from. But I think that I wanted to say that. And of course, we can agree not to agree about my choice of words. Maybe I didn't choose the right wording as far as you are concerned, and I apologize for that. I just know that I make a lot of effort to follow a discussion that can be heard not just by one side, by the whole group of people who are influenced. And if I don't manage to do that, I apologize. But I want to say that this is an effort I make right now. And now I want to answer your question, which I already forgot, so I apologize.
Okay, all right, no apology is needed. I'm going to repeat the question and I'm happy to do so. So the question is, the world is for or against our words or silence, which raises the question of who can facilitate a dialogue between Hamas and the Israeli government, and how can that dialogue be facilitated?
Excellent question. I think that we are looking for this grown-up that can lead us. I would divide my answer to two parts. First of all, it should be a strong leadership with a lot of resilience, with a lot of patience. This is going to be a heavy case to take, and whoever takes it should be very dedicated and with a vision for finding a solution that I agree with Ramsey, that is not going to be forgotten within a short period. We want something to last for a long period. So whoever is going to lead it should be dedicated, should be brave enough to take it. This is a scary one to take. There are most of the chances for whoever takes it, for them to fail. So we need someone brave enough to dare stepping into this mission and to have enough resilience to keep it going forward till the end. What would they want to achieve? Well, the word justice, whenever parties sit in my mediation and they say they want justice, they actually want to win. Justice is in court. Well, I want to win. I want to go to find justice in court. And I just always tell to them, well, you know what? We want to find smart solutions that can hold forever, or at least for a long period, and that could address the whole conflict, and that will not humiliate any of the parties, will address most of the issues needed to be addressed, and that will bring hope, choice, voice, and opportunity to the parties involved. And when I talk about the parties involved, I don't talk about Palestine and Israel. I talk about the people who live in the region. We all want hope. We want ability to live in a respectful way. And I think that this is what these leaders of the Palestinian Israeli should they aim to achieve. I would now want to make a difference between what are my tools as mediator and what are the tools that are relevant to an envoy of diplomatic mediation. Because what is needed here is professional ability to navigate this conflict, but it is not going to be one or two people, like in regular mediation. Most commercial mediations are led by one or two professionals. When we look at the history in the world, most of the global conflicts or political conflicts are solved by envoys. And so it's going to be a group led by or combined by people who have all the characters and the vision together to hold the process, all the characters that I mentioned before. So it's a group and not a he or a she or just one or two people. What else is different or needed in diplomatic mediation? I think that as mediators, we are used to say that we want to be impartial to the conflict. We need to be impartial to the conflict. We need to manage neutrally. Again, history has taught us that this envoy of mediators, diplomatic mediators, usually has many interests in the region of the conflict. And whatever conflict you look in the last century, the envoy, the group of mediators, the diplomatic mediators that were involved had interest in the region. Usually they come from country or countries involved in the region in a way. So this is a difference between classic mediation and diplomatic mediation that will probably be the one that will solve this conflict, hopefully. One more thing that I want to clarify is the difference between classical mediation and diplomatic mediation. As mediators, we never finance or responsible for the agreement. If the parties decide to pay each other or to handle property to one to the other, the mediator is not in charge of the payment or the execution of the contract. In mediation, diplomatic mediation, this is different. When we look again at history, we see that the diplomatic mediation, the groups, they give guarantees, they finance part of the solutions, they support the long processing of the solutions. So there is a big difference. And sometimes they take measures to secure the implementation of the contract. So when I say brave and assertive with resilience, I mean it's a group that is professional enough and that is capable of handling this mission for the long time that will be needed to achieve the resolution, the implementation, and the security for a long time.
Are you ready to become the change you want to see in your community or in your workplace? If so, check out our tailored workshops and mediation skills, training and certification designed to equip you with the practical skills to become an effective conflict resolver and a certified mediation practitioner. Now, let's get back to the show.
So the dialogue, whether it's a diplomatic envoy or it is a group, I will share with you as the moderator, when this question was presented to me, I changed the language because it initially spoke. I had to talk about this because I think Orit brings up a very good point, that these talks are generally at the governmental level and they are not, it's not the individual. And so when I was speaking with Francis in preparation, I said, we need to talk about the government, because when you have millions of individuals, not everyone is in support of what the government is doing. And so I want to recognize that what we're talking about are governmental actions and not always the actions of the individuals. I have a follow-on question for both of you. And or if you're ready, I'm happy to start with you. If you prefer that I start with Ramsey, I'm happy to do that. But because you've talked about the envoys, or sometimes it's called multi-track diplomacy, where you start at the governmental level and then transition to grassroots, do you think it's possible for Hamas and the Israeli government for there to be a win-win situation? And if so, how?
First of all, the day I lose hope, it's going to be a very sad day, and I hope never to reach it. Yes, I want to say yes. It's a very challenging one, but as a mediator, I'm challenged with the most complex cases, and people say to me, you will never mediate this one. And I always say to them, thank you. So I can't fail. You have no expectations. I can't fail. But when we succeed together in achieving resolution to such conflicts, which are told to be so complex and so, people don't believe that they can ever solve them, then it's a teamwork. And my work in this mediations is to put the belief in the room. If us as a community of peace builders and mediators keep on spreading the belief in the ability to find a solution, in the ability of the parties to choose smart leaders at the end of the day, to overcome what has happened and to print for all of us a better future. And if we as peace builders won't be able to believe that, yes, it is possible, then who else is going to do that? This is our role. And you know what? Sometimes I put this optimism in the room when I really have to struggle to find it, because sometimes it really looks as a case that will never end, will never manage to settle. But because as mediators, we push the parties forward gently, but we push the parties and we put this belief in the room. It's like wrapping the room with positiveness. At the end of the day, even the most challenging, really challenging conflict reach to a better end, a better future for the parties, even if it's a super complex, multi-layered conflict. And I want to bring my optimism to the conflict in the Middle East, because otherwise we have no future there, none of us, no matter on which side of the borders. We want a better future for everybody.
Ramsey, is it possible for both Hamas and the Israeli government to win-win solution? And if so, how?
I don't see that any alternative is viable. Not reaching a win-win solution is simply not an option. Really, we are at this situation we're in today because of not reaching a win-win solution. Not only that, I do believe the keys to unlock this crazy lock are already there on the table, just waiting for people to pick them up. And that's why I really liked your question suggesting that the contributors to the resolution would be involving a combination of different actors. Indeed, I think the Turkish contribution to bringing about a guarantee of a cessation of hostilities is absolutely crucial, and they must be backed up by all international support necessary so they can actually provide that guarantee. But let's go more than that, because also what everyone without exception in the region needs and has the right to need and has the right for everyone else to work towards is equal access to stable, prosperous future. Stable means, therefore, the framework of that prosperous future is not going to be targeted by acts of violence from one group or another, or disenfranchised by the solution. And therefore, one source of hope, of potential for this prosperous future is what is called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is absolutely huge. It's conspicuous by the lack of awareness of it. Saudi Arabia is part of it. Iran is part of it. Israel is a potential major benefactor from it, because again, potentially that red marker route to pull at the port of Haifa could be very much part of the Belt and Road Initiative alternative routes. And so therefore, China, I think, and fellow member states of the Belt and Road Initiative and rival projects, whether it be the G20 or other rival projects, to provide alternative sources of large-scale, long-term, cross-border, cross-national infrastructure investment projects. Those countries are not going to see any chance of these wonderful mega projects come to fruition so long as there's turmoil in the region. One country's problem is a problem for all the countries who have a hope of prosperity from this mega project. And therefore, I would say, in fact, that you have guarantor with support to Turkey. You have the red marker route to the port of Haifa with Mohammed bin Salman. Hopefully, we'll find some way on that basis to persuade Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to drop his fixated opposition to an independent Palestinian state, because those two are mutually exclusive preconditions. And we have then the sources of financial support and investment in the infrastructure that's part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, someone say, hey, Ramsey, what about the environment? What about the climate? I say, I haven't forgotten it, because the funding for infrastructure investment projects in the Belt and Road Initiative, funding for such infrastructure investment projects is conditional upon those projects which require funding to prove that they are contributing to a reduction in greenhouse gases. And that's where then that link is closed. We come full circle and really addressing major issues in parallel rather than separately, which is again part of what I call the disjointed, false separation of linked problems.
Ramsey, I am going to ask Francis to have another session. The Belt and Road Initiative is much beyond the scope of this conversation. And for those of you that are not aware what the Belt and Road Initiative is, I suggest you read about it. It does impact more than just the region that we are focused on today. It actually impacts the East as well as the continent of Africa. So I appreciate that foreshadowing of another session, and I'll leave it to Francis to organize that. But I am going to shift us back to today's conversation. And thank you for that, because I've heard both of you say something that as we wrap up this session, I am going to liken this to the Greek mythology regarding Pandora. And Pandora had a box that was given to her, and she was told to keep the box closed. And all of us know she didn't keep the box closed. She opened up the box, and war and pestilence and fighting and other things that we are a part of our lives exist today, according to mythology. But the one thing that was left in the box is the thing that the two of you have talked about. And I think for both of you, regardless of the words that you agree and don't agree to, you both agree to hope. So as we wrap up, my question for you is, as a peace builder, as a mediator, as a global citizen, is peace in the region plausible, or is it a dream? And Or, I'll start with you.
Yes, it is, and it's a must, and we have to believe, and we have to talk about it. And I would say that personally, I feel that it is very important for me to participate in this discussion. We can all sit at home and don't do anything regarding this conflict. I'm not a politician. I can't influence what is done by my government, but I can make a difference in my circles. And this is my responsibility as a citizen of Israel, as a global citizen, as a peacemaker, as a mediator. And yes, it is possible. And we should keep on gently pushing towards this direction, and keep on putting our belief that will influence, hopefully, other people to believe that it is possible. Yes, we can achieve better future for the region, for everybody that is involved.
Ramsey, is it a dream? Is it plausible, or is it possible?
It depends entirely about what we do about it. Because if we continue to allow assumptions go unquestioned, and where then the vast majority, or at least a significant proportion of the general public, so there is such a word, to follow, then it will remain a dream. Let me just give one simple example, Tina, if I may, just to illustrate the point.
A brief example, because
Yeah,
my
very,
timekeeper is
absolutely
looking at me.
Well, maybe we can make an early start on the next session right now. You see, that's what I mean about lateral thinking. There we go, getting creative already. Okay, so one of the simple things that cause hostility and polarization: one state solution, two state solution. I'm sure we've all heard it, right? And so, in typical fashion, your friend Ramsey says, "I want both." They say, "What? Are you mad again, Ramsey?" I say, "Yes, quite happily." Then what do you mean? I say, well, first of all, if they are going to arrive at a one-state solution, it's going to have far more credibility if it's arrived at through a negotiated treaty between two sovereign states. First point. Second point, for those who want a one-state solution, they have the opportunity of demonstrating how it would work in a microcosm fashion to show how the state of the two-state solution, the Israeli part, how that would work, and how people, for example, from an Israeli or Arab background would fare in such a state. Also provides yet another solution. Those who fear the demographic time bomb, oh no, we can't have a one-state solution because then there'll be equal number of Palestinians and Israelis, and it won't be the kind of state of Israel we want. Okay, well, in that case, if you have a significant part of the Palestinian population in the state of Palestine, and those who are in the state of Israel are those who are allowed to exercise their right to the right of return, that takes care of that demographic time bomb. So really, I think what is absolutely crucial is creating the space for a bit of creative lateral thinking. I am filled with dread at the idea of leaving it to the experts, because they're the ones who got us to this mess in the first place. And so I really think that forums like this have a very valuable role to play to at least provide a source of alternative perspective on the unquestioned assumptions.
Are you ready to become the change you want to see in your community or in your workplace? If so, check out our tailored workshops and mediation skills, training, and certifications designed to equip you with the practical skills to become an effective conflict resolver and a certified mediation practitioner. Now, let's get back to the show.
Art Ramsey, thank you for a rich, invigorating conversation, and this conversation is not over. As we approach the conclusion of this event, I encourage each of you, those of you who have watched and who may see this at a later date, to reflect on the insights that have been shared today and think, how can we as global citizens leverage our collective power to support the peace process in the Middle East? I invite each of you to take this opportunity to turn our discussions into actions. We have the next installment of this discussion, and with that, I am going to cede the floor to Francis. Francis, it's been my pleasure to serve as moderator today with these two wonderful panelists, but I am going to cede the floor to you now.
Thank you. And again, thank each and every one of you for sharing your perspective in today's discussion. This event would have not been possible without your insight and without your contribution. Like the moderator has said, and like both of you have said, this is a beginning of a series of conversations to be had. I hope you don't get tired with us knocking at your door, asking you to come and share your knowledge, your experience, and your wisdom as a peace builder, as a mediator with the larger audience. I thank you all. Please have a good rest of your day. And please be sure to join us for our final segment of this event. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can support us by leaving a 5-star review. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to stay informed whenever we upload a new episode. See you in the next episode.